today I would like to present my PhD project, which is titled A Grammar of Murui, and the Katarzyna language of Northwest Amazonia. And I started this project in 2013 under the supervision of Professor Alexandra Eichenwald, Bob Dixon, and Dr. Elena Miches. And I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, but I would like to dedicate this pre-completion seminar to my father, who wanted to be here, but unfortunately he cannot. So this presentation will cover the following topics. First, I will give a short summary of my research, and then I will talk about my thesis outline, and then I would like to discuss briefly the Murui language and its linguistic features. And after that, I will focus on one specific linguistic topic that I wanted to present to you today, namely the expression of negation in Murui. So at the end, I will present the outcomes of this PhD project. So the purpose of this thesis is to provide the first complete reference grammar of Murui, which is a previously little described language, endangered language, spoken in Northwest Amazonia. The purpose is also to advise to advance existing classification of Amazonian languages, as well as to contribute to typological research on the languages spoken in South America. The methodology of this project is based on intensive immersion fieldwork of 12 months, based mainly on participant observation and interaction with the people, with the community. And the project discussed within the framework of basic linguistic theory, which refers to the fundamental theoretical concepts underlying most work in language description and in linguistic typology. So the linguistic database that I used for this PhD project consisted of about 700 pages of texts, all analyzed and glossed, about 1,200 pages of field notes, 20 hours of annotated recordings, 30 hours of yet untranscribed audio, and 50 hours of professionally recorded video footage, as well as 4 hours of professionally recorded traditional songs. So this is my thesis outline. The thesis consists of about 22 chapters, of precisely 22 chapters, and then we have also a selection of text in the appendix. So a little bit about the Murui language and people. So Murui, the language, and I focus here mainly on the variety called Bue, belongs to the Wojtylak language family, which is one of the smaller language families in Amazonia. And the Wojtylak language family consists of two other languages. We have Okaina and Nonuya, and both are critically endangered, with less than 90 speakers remaining in total. And Murui is spoken by about 2,000 people in Northwest Amazonia, along the banks of the Putumayo, Caraparana, and Igara-Paraná rivers, in southern Colombia, and in northern parts of Peru, among the Ambiyacu and Napo rivers. So here we have the location of the Murui speakers. They are marked in red here on the map. So in the literature, the Murui language is commonly referred to as the Witoto language. It is known as the Witoto language, in fact. But the Witoto language doesn't exist. So the term Witoto is used for 4 different ethnic groups, which speak 4 mutually intelligible dialects, which are Murui, Menica, Nipode, and Nika. And those languages form, in fact, a dialect continuum. So these 4 groups consider themselves to be separate social groups which speak separate languages. And in this work, I refer to Murui as a language in the political sense, although linguistically it is one of those 4 dialects. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of the Murui world. So here's a view over the Caraparana River in southern Colombia, where I did my field work, very close to the Tercera India community. And here is Tadave, who is my adopted sister, who introduced me to the Tercera India community in 2013 for the first time. And here we have grandmother Usunio Francisca, who is my adopted mother, who is the mother of Tadave, my sister. And she is 80 years old now, and to my knowledge, she is the only remaining fairly monolingual speaker of Murui. All the other speakers of Murui are bilingual. So let us now have a look at some important typological features of the Murui language. So in terms of the language structure, Murui is nominative, has a nominative accusative alignment system with head marking and some elements of dependent marking. At the morphological level, the language is largely agglutinating with some fusion and predominantly suffixing. Grammatical relations are expressed through pronominal cross-referencing on the verb, with only one cross-referencing position, the subject SA, which is a suffix, and case marking. And we have 5 different case markings in Murui. And out of those 5 case marking, we have topical subject SA, topical non-subject SA, and the locative case markers. They are conditioned by differential case marking. And in that differential case marking of those 3 core arguments are related mainly to focus and topicality. So there is also a large multiple classifier system in Murui which consists of more than 80 classifiers as well as repeaters. The language is predicate final with SV-AOV order, but the ordering can also be determined by pragmatic factors which also permit other constituent orders. Murui has 3 open word lexical word classes. We have nouns, verbs, and adjectives. And there's also 11 closed word classes. And all those word classes, both open and closed, are distinctly different in their morphosyntactic features, such as, for instance, tail marking. So, Murui word classes, both open and closed, share numerous properties. So, for instance, many members of the open and closed word classes can be used as heads of intransitive predicates. And I give you here an example in one of verb, which is the head of the intransitive predicate. In the diomiko, are you two sleeping? And in two, we have a question word, which is the head of the intransitive predicate. Bu diomiko, who are you? Murui has a rich system of verbal morphology, which is mostly aspectual, and there's only one tense marker, which is future. Non-future is unmarked in Murui. Verbal affixes appear roughly in the order shown in the diagram here, and I underlined here positions which are obligatory marked for the verb to be fully grammatical. And I also in bold I put the topic of this pre-completion seminar today, attributive and standard negative marking. So you can kind of see where it is on the predicate structure, on the verb structure here. And I give you an example of that here. Hokorita yakani tikwedy, I will not want to go washing, for instance, clothes. So this is exactly how the verb more or less looks like in Murui. So you have an idea. So today I would like to discuss one specific topic of Murui grammar, which is the negation. And negation in the language is expressed differently from most Indo-European languages, such as English or Polish. And for this reason, I want to focus today on that topic, on negation, to explicitly show you that it is important to study lesser-known languages because, for instance, simple things such as saying no might be much more different than in the languages that we know. So in Murui, negation involves the morphological process of affixation, where the negative markers are added to a corresponding positive. So we have here a table that shows that there are 2 distinctive ways of marking predicate for positive and negative values. We have the standard and the attributive marking. And the standard positive is always formally unmarked with the 0 realization, and standard negative is always marked. And both attributive and positive and negative is always marked. So in terms of negation, Murui has 2 negative predicate markers. We have the standard negative marker nie, and we have the negative attributive marker ni. And the standard negative is used for negating verbs and nouns, and the negative attributive is used for negating verbs, adjectives, and nouns. And attributive markers, those re and ni, and the standard negative nie, are mutually exclusive, and they belong to the same inflectional system. available in positive than in the negative clauses. And we are going to see that this with imperatives, where we have the neutralization under negation. So there is no difference between the way declaratives and interrogatives are negated in Murui, but there is a difference in their semantics. And Murui lacks an independent grammatical word for yes or no. We have a particle who, which agrees with the verb polarity. There are two question words which can function as indefinites. We've got bu for who, and it can also mean nobody or somebody, and bue, which means what, which can be used for nothing or something. And again, their positive and negative readings depend on predicate's polarity. Murui has no negative copula, and that's very much unlike other Wojtylakian languages, because in Nonuya we do have a negative copula, hini, and in Okaina we have ani. So in Murui, main and dependent clauses are negated in the same way, there is no difference, so we just add the standard negative and the negative attributive marker. I give you here an example in 3A, where you have najnieniu ebire nialniede with the standard negative nie on the verb nial, to speak. So she isn't speaking in a nice way. And then in example 3B, we have the negative attributive ni, so najena nialnide, she could not speak about this. So those are those two markers that today we are going to focus on. And it is important at this point to say that while the standard negative nie marks negation of all kinds, such as we saw in example 3a, the negative attributive ni denotes lack of ability with verbs, and we see that in example 3b, lack of property with adjectives, and lack of possession with nouns. So the standard negative marker nie occurs on predicates whose heads are verbs, that can be both intransitive and transitive, and nouns, which are always, in this case, intransitive. So I give you an example here in 4a, Maria hitha hopomo hai niede, the daughter of Maria isn't going home, that's a verb, high to go. And in 4b you have kai moniedikal, we are not fathers, with the noun mo, father. And the standard negative precedes the future tense marker in Murui, therefore in Murui negation is closer to the root than tense marking. And I give you an example of that in 5, Adam eubiga bimonado no kaina hinonite make, where you can see that the standard negative precedes the future tense marker. So Murui negative clauses show special syntactic properties. So while in positive declarative sentences, non-subject arguments are optionally marked with na, because of differential object marking, in their negative counterparts, na is frequently present. So I give you an example here of the, sorry it's not a line, but here of that marking of the object, Walter idzie mohibije na riniede. Walter didn't plant coca in the chagra, and coca is marked by na. And as far as I am aware, typologically it is very unusual to have apprehensive which can be negated, but in Murui it can be. And it can be negated by this standard negative marker nie. So I give an example here in 7, which is a warning of an elder to a boy who wanted to go to the jungle on his own, and the elder was telling him not to be afraid, because if he is, then the bad spirits might get him. So he says, do not, careful, do not get scared, if you will. And a little bit about nominal constituents and identity in Murui. So for the first and the second singular, dual, and plural, we have identity which is expressed by means of an intransitive predicate with nouns functioning as heads. So in 8, there is an example example of the positive intransitive predicate with the noun had uthuma, grandfather. So uthuma dikwe, I am a grandfather. And in 9, we have the negative intransitive predicate with this standard negative nie, dziopłe rajno nie domują. You are not teachers. But what happens for the third person in Murui is that identity is expressed by a verbless clause. So we have a juxtaposition of two NPs. So I give an example here in 10, which is a verbless clause which expresses positive polarity or affirmation here. Najniaino pareka bujniaino. She fareka bujniaino, literally she is fareka bujniaino. But why do I talk about this? Well, Murui verbless clauses cannot express verbal categories such as tense, aspect, and negation. So how do we negate those verbless clauses? Well, the only way to express those categories is by means of an intransitive predicate. So we have to convert these into intransitive predicate. And we have an example of that in 11, which is the positive intransitive predicate, kwe ini manorai maite, my husband will be ashamed. And in 12, we have the negative intransitive predicate, kwe ito nimairai maniete, my uncle is not the wise man. So Murui attributive markers, re and ni, occur on predicates whose heads are verbs, adjectives, and nouns. And depending on the word class that they occur with, the attributive markers have different semantics. And those semantics involve ability with verbs, they involve property with adjectives, and possession with nouns. And we are going to have a look at those three right now. So here we have attributive markers on verbs for presence or lack of ability. So in example 13, we have a positive attribution with verbs. So a woman has asked her granddaughter to sweep Adriana's house, and Adriana's father responded, Adriana hovohere gaitiare de iteta. The daughter can sweep inside the house of Adriana. Adriana is there. So literally, she has ability to sweep in that sense here. And example 14 illustrates negative attribution with verbs, so lack of ability. So here you have a small girl who was asked to go to the river to play, and she didn't want to go, and she answered, Idzie mohajaka niedykwe, kwe eiji iko ittykweta, inidykwe. If you look at the last predicate inidykwe, I cannot swim, that's the verb which is marked with this negative attributive for lack of ability. So then we have attributive markers on adjectives for lack of property. And again, very similar here in 15. This fish is tasty, or literally, this fish has the property of being tasty. And again, the negative attribution for the lack of property with this negative attributive ni. What he says is not amusing, or literally, his saying doesn't have the property of being amusing. And then we have attributive markers on nouns for presence or lack of property. And we see that in example 17, uruedikwe, I have a child. And then in 18, you have the negative attribution for the lack of property, uruenidikwe, I do not have a child. And what I want to stress here is that Murui does not have a separate verb for to mean have. So the attributive markers are in fact the most prevalent ways of expressing possession in the language. So a little bit about negation of interrogatives, since we saw declarative clauses. So in Murui, questions differ from declarative clauses, but by their distinct raising falling intonation. There is no other marking of questions in Murui. And all types of question can occur with the negative and negative attributive markers. So in fact, we have two types of negative questions. We have those which have predicate markings and those which don't. So the negative questions with the predicate marking, they presuppose positive answers. And you can kind of compare that with the 19 and 20, 19 being question where you have kwe dyga hayaka byomyko, do you want to go with me? And the interpretation is just seeking information, yes or no. There is no presupposition that it is either yes or no. But this is very much unlike 20, where you have ewu kwe hita hukoabe na kenyete. So, sister, didn't my daughter clean outside the house? Where you have the presupposition that she probably did. And then we have a different type, a second type of negative questions, which has no predicate marking, and those kind of questions are used for the third person only, not for the first, second, and another person. So those kind of questions strongly presuppose positive answers. We have that example in 21, where you have ananeko mo inie, isn't it in the Maloka, and the presupposition is that it is surely there. So let us now move to privative markers, which is also a very interesting topic when it comes to the negation in Murui. So Murui has a privative marker no, which means without. And the privative no occurs only on the negative attributive marker ni. So this is the only marker it can actually co-occur with out of those attributive markers, and it never occurs with this positive attributive re. So in the examples here we see that depending on the head of the predicate, the semantics will change, as we saw with other attributive markers on the previous slides. So in example 22 you have that privative markers follow the noun. So kwe eni no bijata, I came without my mother. In example 23 you have the verb, which actually with this negative attributive marker we kind of get the idea of not of lack of ability. So te nani no haide, he left without being able to cut the tree. And in 24 you have an adjective which is marked with this negative attributive marker for the lack of property. So again, ufini no beide, he toasted the coca leaves without the baking tin being hot, literally meaning without the baking tin having the property of being hot. And as you can see, such privative clauses always share the same subject. And what I can say is that the privative clauses are very similar to clausal nominalization in that they have a number of morphological and syntactic properties of nominalization. So, for instance, they can occur. They always occur in the pre-final position. Note that Murui is has verb final constituent order. Then they can also be modified, and structurally they actually resemble nominalization, especially those which I call event nominalization. And the privative nominalizations, those types of nominalizations are more restricted than other types of nominalizations in Murui. They retain their inherent properties of their heads. So for instance, when we have the privative nominalizations with verbal heads, they cannot take nominal plural markers. And the privative nominalizations can only occur as peripheral arguments. And these privative nominalizations could be considered a type of an independent clause, but overall in Murui you have nominalizations that are the main way to form dependent clauses of all kinds. So we have complement clauses, we have relative clauses, everything is based on nominalizations. And also at this point, this is the fact that those things resemble nominalizations is not very surprising that they are in fact a little bit restricted, because in Murui there is a verb-noun-like continuum of nominalization types. So the privative nominalization are included in this spectrum as less noun-like as other types of nominalization. So they fit within that continuum. So a little bit about the privative, since we discussed those privative nominalizations. So this privative marker no can occur also with the standard negative nie. As we saw in the previous examples, we saw that with the negative attributive ni, and now we see that with the standard negative nie. And when that happens, it only occurs on verbs or derived adjectives. I'll tell you about that in a second. So in 25 we have "Majhe nie bitekły." I came without having worked. There is no interpretation of having ability or not having ability. This is simply I came without having worked. Such a construction where the standard negative is followed by the privative no can also have prohibitive meanings in Murui. And we have here a table which shows the prohibitive and privative readings with verbs, adjectives, and nouns. And we can see that the prohibitive reading is only possible with the standard negative nie on verbs and derived adjectives, and otherwise the reading is always privative. So before I actually talk to you about the prohibitive in Murui, which is very much related to this privative, I wanted to show you positive imperative in Murui. So generally Murui imperative is used only for the first and the second person, and never for the third person. So positive imperative is formed in Murui by either adding the suffix no, as in example 26, and that happens for the most of the monosyllabic roots, naje, naduno, chudat, or it can have the form of bare roots, which is much more commonly occurring form of imperative, as in 27, biroit kai hoko, let us wash these clothes. So what this shows us is that in fact this imperative no, such as the one in 26, is homophonous to the privative no that we discussed in the previous examples. And I will tell you what are other reasons for this in a second. So now, if we look at the prohibitive in Murui, we can form it by the standard negative nie plus the privative no. So we have those examples in 28, 9, and 30. You have "du nie no rajte," don't chew it, he said. Then in 29 you have "nial nie no hadje isoj," do not speak like this. And in 30 you have "rozinaj nie no," don't become cold. So interestingly, there is an asymmetry in use of the positive and negative imperatives, because unlike positive imperatives, which are used for the first and the second person, the prohibitive or the negative imperatives are used as well for the third person. So now a little bit more about this prohibitive. We see that in Murui it shows additional morphological complexity. So I give an example in 31a, where you have this positive imperative hai, go, but under prohibitive or negative imperative you have hai nie no, which is followed by those suffixation. And the prohibitive expresses fewer categories than in the positive imperative. Prohibitive does not take all the tail markers. For instance, the distinction between the delayed and immediate imperative is neutralized under negation. We see that in example 22, where you have immediate imperative, you have kenokai, clean this quickly, but under negation we have neutralization, where in 32a, b, it should be, you have kenyeno, don't clean outside this house. So I propose that Murui prohibitive developed out of the privative, and historically the Murui prohibitive originated in the reanalysis of privative nominalized clauses, and the prohibitive was used as a command strategy that wants to say that the privative was used to express prohibitive meanings. So for instance, to say don't do it, they used to say without doing it. That's the origin of the prohibitive. And synchronically, the privative has become a major means of expressing the prohibitive in Murui. And it also, interestingly, acquired the imperative-like intonation, which is sharply rising, a falling intonation, which the privative doesn't have. So all privative, as we will see, because I'm gonna pronounce them in a second, have declarative intonation. So the path that involves the reanalysis of the privative into the prohibitive, I kind of try to put it into this nice diagram. You have 3 stages where the clausal normalization becomes command strategy in stage 2, and then ultimately becomes prohibitive or negative imperative. So you can compare the Murui privative and prohibitive here in examples 33a and b, and look at the intonation or try to listen. I try to speak Murui as well as I can. You have my no bitekwe, I came without having work, and in 33b you have my don't work. So to finish this presentation before I run out of time, I want to tell you a little bit about the grants that I got. So my PhD scholarship was granted under the Australian Laureate Fellowship Project of Professor Eichenwald. And in 2014 I also got Firebird Foundation grant for oral documentation project of the Murui literature. In 2016, a film that me and Chris Lupinski did was officially selected for a film festival, and in 2014 I was the finalist of the 3 Miss Thesis competition in Townsville. Throughout my PhD, I organized 2 workshops, one nationally here in Cairns with Simon Overall, and one internationally in the Netherlands with Professor De Vries. Here is the list of my publications. There are in total 11 publications, but if you want to, we can discuss that after the presentation. I also co-edited 2 volumes, one again with Simon Overall and one with Yvonne Treis from Paris. Here I gave a number of conference talks and colloquia, so 7 in 2016. It actually becomes really interesting because it's also 7 in 2015 and 7 in 2014, but only 2 in 2013. So totally there was 16 talks in Australia, as well as in Sydney and Melbourne and here, and 7 in Europe, as well as in North and South America. Other outputs of this PhD project, I've been writing for a couple of years now a popular science book in Polish. There is 2 ethnographic documentaries. One is a short documentary that we did in 2016 with Chris Lupinski, and the one that will appear in 2017 called Kai Murui Uwai Murui Words. And throughout this PhD I also gave 3 radio interviews, 2 for ABC Far North and 1 for ABC Radio National. So, to finish up this presentation, I would like to thank my advisors, the committee members, and everyone here in Cairns for your attention today. And last but not least, I want to express the deepest gratitude to the Murui people, especially the members of the area clan of Tercera India community. Because my work on the Murui language would never have been possible without their support, their patience, and most importantly, the friendship. So among the Murui elders, there is a custom to finish an important speech by saying Kaimaki Eomare, Akira Pejotik Murui, my Omoi Hai, which roughly translates as good, I told my story, the story of the Murui, now go.
Thank you so much, Cassie. That was